Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today's community conversation. I'm Dean Tufts. Dean's my name, not my title. I'm the Vice President for Facilities and Services here at Stony Brook. Quick shout out to the administration and finance teammates listening in. You've been in the thick of it since COVID started. Most of you here on campus every day, so thank you. I'd now like to introduce President Maurie McInnis. Good morning. And our Senior Vice President for Administration and Finance, Kathleen Byington. Good morning. I hope most of you on the call have had a chance to look at the new budget website. Just Google Stony Brook Achieving Financial Sustainability, and that you'll return to it often as we'll continuously update it. We'll first start with remarks from President McInnis, followed by a short financial overview, and then we'll turn to questions and answers. We received a number of questions in advance, so we'll try to get to as many of them as possible during the Q&A session. You can continue to send your questions through the budget website link during the presentation, and we'll try to get to some of those as well. President McInnis.
Thank you, Dean. And thanks to all of you on Zoom for taking time out of your day to join this meeting. I can certainly tell you that when I was first named president of Stony Brook University in March of this year, I did not think that the first time I would be speaking with all of you would have to be via Zoom or to discuss the budget. But times have certainly changed. March seems like a very long time ago to me, as it must also feel to many of you. Before we get into the substance of today's meeting, I want you to know that I fully recognize that you are operating in one of the most difficult environments any of us has ever experienced. I truly appreciate your continued support, understanding, and commitment to this institution. While the height of the pandemic seems to be behind us, at least in New York, if not elsewhere in the country, the economic havoc that COVID has left in its wake is significant and long-lasting. And it is impacting Stony Brook's financial health in multiple ways, both in the short term and for the long term. Kathy is going to go into more detail as we go through this presentation on the financial impact COVID is having on our campus and the stopgap measures that we are going to have to try to take in order to close that funding gap. But there are a related set of longer-term challenges that we also need to work to address now. As with every challenge, it also creates an opportunity for us to come together as one campus and to proactively address them before they become even more serious. I want to show just one slide before I turn this over to Kathy, who will give us a more detailed explanation of where we are financially and the underlying drivers. The slide tells the long-term story in a nutshell. The bars on the graph show the money we receive towards instruction, state aid, tuition, and various fees in the red and blue. These are actual numbers through last year and projected numbers going forward. The gray area shows the actual cost of funding and academic support. And as you'll see, there has been a steady and significant gap between the cost and the funds we receive. That gap starts to dramatically widen in the coming years, and it is a gap that together we need to work out how to close. There's a lot more detail behind these numbers than what you see on this slide, and I would like to ask Kathy to walk through some of the important financial information with which we all need to become familiar. I strongly believe that information is power, and there needs to be a shared understanding of where we are today, how we got here, so that we can plan where we are going to go in the future. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, President McInnis. First of all, I want to recognize that finance and accounting can be complex. And that is particularly true in an organization like Stony Brook University that has many parts to its operation in different legal and operational structures. Please, if you're interested, take the time to study the material that is available on the website and ask your questions. We will continue to update the material in response to your concerns. Likewise, we also have to recognize that this is a particularly fluid and unpredictable time. 6 months ago, no one could have predicted how COVID would impact our campus. What 6 months from now, or even 6 weeks from now, looks like is hard to know. So the numbers I'm going to share with you today are based on the best information we have available right now. But please understand, these could and likely will change. This diagram is a visual representation showing the parts of our institution which fall under our different financial umbrellas. Today we're going to talk primarily about our total operating budget. This budget includes those parts we traditionally think of as being part of our university, including the academic and support piece of our university, the hospital, the clinical practice, research, and other pieces. But it does not include the externally required accounting entries that are in our financial statements. A great example of the difference is something that's important to all of us: our state-funded fringe benefits, the health care and retirement benefits for faculty and staff who are funded on state accounts. While that is part of the cost of running the university, it falls outside of Stony Brook's total operating budget. The funds are not received here on campus, and we don't make any decisions about them. It is also a key component of state support, but it will not appear in our discussion of Stony Brook's operating budget as it is paid directly by the state of New York. Our conversation today is going to focus on the operating budget. As you can see, within the $2.8 billion of the total operating budget, there's $1.9 billion in budget for Stony Brook University's healthcare operations. That's the hospital, the clinical practices, the Long Island State Veterans Home. We won't spend much time on that today, although we will provide some overview. And there's $927 million in operating budget for the academic and research operations. We're going to drill down into university research and revenue in particular during today's discussion. The academic and research portion of the budget is a total of $927 million. Last year, 85% of our funding came from 4 sources: tuition, state tax support, research, and what's called IFR or sutra revenue. The tuition and state tax support we'll discuss in more detail later. As for IFR and sutra, this category contains self-sustaining accounts that provide essential university services, such as transportation and student health services. But it also includes departmentally generated revenue, for example, from summer and winter term academic programs. These funds have a clear income and expenditure relationship and are generally used to fund the operational and strategic costs of these essential university services. Before leaving this slide, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the Stony Brook Foundation, which holds a $266 million endowment. The Stony Brook Foundation, through distribution from the endowment and application of restricted and unrestricted gifts, was budgeted to provide $43.5 million in support of our operations last year. The Stony Brook Foundation primarily funds student scholarships, as well as faculty support and research in both the provost area and in the health sciences divisions. As with all foundations, its endowment is restricted in terms of both the amount that can be spent on an annual basis, as well as by donor intent. So where does the money actually get spent? We are a people business, and our expenses reflect that. The vast majority, 60.2%, is salary and wages, not including the fringe benefits we previously discussed. We have a lot of valuable employees, and that's where we spend the majority of our funds. The second largest expense is contractual services, $82.7 million, or 8.9%, which covers a variety of outsourced services, such as grounds maintenance and landscaping, custodial services, catering, laundry services, and many others. In addition, there's $20 million of these subcontracts, which are subcontracts to other institutions from research grants. Student aid is our third largest expense at $80 million, or 8% of our budget. And this goes back to support our students through various grants, scholarships, and discounts on tuition. Accessibility has been and continues to be important to us as an institution. This is a third way that we can look at our budget. Here we are essentially asking the question, what are the budgets of the different functional areas of the university? So here you can see the majority, $241.7 million, goes to academic affairs or the provost office. But this is followed by research funded by the foundation at $200 million. And here you can see the health science schools and the School of Medicine at $143 million. So those are substantial portions of this academic and research operating budget. We go back for just a minute to the prior slide. So both research and the budgets of the Health Science School and the School of Medicine are part of the expenditures here on salaries and wages, contractual services, and other. I'd like to draw your attention to the fourth piece of this pie called University Administration at $118.5 million, and break down what makes up this division. The actual administration that perhaps comes to mind when you think of university administration, the president's office, and other staff that supports it, is actually only 3.8%, or $4.5 million of this total $118.5 million. The remaining budget includes a lot of general costs for the university as a whole. For example, there's $37 million here for facilities, operation, and safety, which cover our entire campus, both East Campus and West, as well as $36 million for utilities, all reported as part of administration. Also here are human resources, Title IX enforcement, general counsel, government and community relations, marketing, and a long list of other important services. I'm going to take a pause here. I'd encourage you to spend some time on the webpage. There you will find a lot more detail than I can cover today on the revenues and expenditures of the university. Now that we've established the money the university has and where it goes, we can take a deeper look at the financial situation that we're currently facing. Essentially, the problem is fourfold, all of which have been exacerbated by COVID. We are facing a decline in state support. This is a national trend, and Stony Brook is no exception. We'll go into more detail on that in a minute. We are seeing a change in our student mix. We pride ourselves on successfully recruiting and retaining a high number of international students. This year, however, is shaping up to be a very difficult year, driven by obvious concerns about COVID in the United States, as well as ongoing visa and immigration restrictions. These obstacles are resulting in a significant decline in international enrollment, which has an impact on our tuition revenue. Third is unfunded commitments. We have been handed a variety of unfunded commitments from the state that are contributing to our unsustainable financial operations. And finally, Stony Brook University is unable to raise tuition to the level required to support a public research university at the AAU level. There is simply a gap between what it costs to provide this kind of excellent education and support to research and what we receive in revenue to cover those costs. In the first chart, which President McInnis shared with us, she presented a definition that included state tax support, tuition, and fees as the revenue streams that primarily fund academic and support costs. This chart shows those funding sources on a per-student basis. As you can see from this chart, the amount we receive per student from the state has decreased substantially. In 2009, state tax support covered 62%, or $8,606 per student. Now, state tax support is covering just 37%, or $5,847 per student. While state funding has been flat through most of this period, our student body has increased substantially. This is what has resulted in the overall decline in state support per student. This is not unique to New York. This is part of a national trend that we explore more on the website. The important takeaway for all of us is that we do not see this trend reversing anytime soon. In fact, we expect just the opposite. Just as we experienced a decline in state funding for a number of years following the 2008 Great Recession, we have to anticipate the same occurring this time around with COVID. For example, we were recently informed that our state support allocation for last year was retroactively short-funded to the tune of $19 million. And while nothing is confirmed, we have been told to expect a 20 to 30% cut in state tax support this year, which at 20% is a $25 million decrease in our state funding, taking us from $147 million to $122 million for the 2020-2021 academic year. If all else holds constant, this would mean a decline in student funding from 37% this past year to just 31% for the current academic year. The second key driver is the changing student mix between out-of-state and in particular international students and in-state students. As an institution, we have been remarkably successful in fostering strong international relationships, and this has been reflected in our enrollment mix. Despite various challenges, up until this year, we have maintained a high number of international students in comparison to similar universities. This is important, not just because the mix provides important diversity and fresh perspectives, but because out-of-state students, as a result of their higher tuition rates, contribute a larger share of our overall funding than do in-state students. For example, while out-of-state students last year represented only 22% of our student body, they account for 43% of our tuition revenue. This year is going to be different, however. Based on our current enrollment numbers, we are projecting a $20.6 million gross decline in out-of-state tuition revenue, almost entirely due to the decline in international enrollment. And while these international students may be disproportionately represented in some programs of the university and not in others, the tuition revenue affects us all. While we have been filling most of the seats in our incoming freshman class, the gross decline is only offset by a $4 million increase in in-state tuition revenue, which results in a $16.6 million deficit. So to recap what we've seen so far, we're anticipating losing $25 million from the state and $16.6 million in gross tuition. However, I don't want us to get into the mindset that this is only about COVID. Absolutely, COVID is costing this university a lot and putting additional strain on the budget that would not otherwise be there, details of which I'll get into momentarily. But there are larger trends at play here that are entirely outside of the scope of COVID. This brings me to our third key driver, unfunded commitments. There are a number of these unfunded commitments. One that we often talk about is the so-called TAP gap, which already costs Stony Brook University about $10 million per year. The Tuition Assistance Program, which provides support for our neediest New York State students, is funded at the level of the 2010 tuition rates. And so it is this gap between the 2010 tuition and our current tuition rates which creates the gap that Stony Brook must fund. We were also just informed that for next year, we will receive $5 million less than what was promised to us from the state for funding for the TAP program. This is all money we will have to find from somewhere else in our budgets. On this slide, you can see an even bigger unfunded commitment: contractual salary increases that are mandated by the state. To be clear, we support these salary increases. They are well earned and fully deserved. That is not the issue at all. The challenge is that this state negotiated cost has not been offset by increases in state aid. In fact, as you can see on this graphic, by 2024, state negotiated contractual salary increases will exhaust and then quickly exceed all state support in the following years. What this means is that every dollar that we receive from the state is going to be spent not on new programs, not on student aid, not on improvements to our campus, but on the contracted increases of everyone's salaries. Unfortunately, we simply do not have many tools in our toolbox for addressing this reasonable growth in costs without the offsetting increases in state support. One of the tools that other universities can use is tuition increases. Whereas other universities may be able to look to tuition to address their budgetary concerns, our tuition is set by the state. As I've said previously, accessibility is paramount to this institution, to our families, and to our mission. However, when you compare us to our peers in the Northeast, and again, there's more data on the website that looks at in-state and out-of-state tuition rates and compares Stony Brook University to other AAU institutions. But across all of these measures, our tuition is consistently one of the lowest. Our inability to increase tuition to comparable public AAU university levels is exacerbating an unsustainable financial situation. That situation is increasing costs, whether they be mandated, COVID, programmatically related, or otherwise, with flat or decreasing revenue sources. You've probably felt this in some form or fashion over the last few years, although the changes we have had to make, we've managed to do with minimal impact to our student success, to the quality of our academics, or to support for research. Every year, we have had to figure out how to balance our budget, and it has certainly not been without pain. It is important that we all understand the key long-term drivers of our financial challenges. But today, we really need to understand the cumulative impact that COVID is having on our finances now. I've mentioned some of them as part of the long-term trends, but let's bring it all together. COVID resulted in the largest decline in economic activity in recent history, with an annualized 32.9% decline in gross domestic product, which has led to record unemployment. This chart lays out what we are currently expecting in the academic and research budget in this coming year. First, our net tuition revenue will decrease at least $12.3 million. That is the previously referenced $16.6 million in gross tuition, net of an increase in payments from students for accounts still due from last year of $4.3 million. There is the $25.2 million projected cut in state support we just discussed, as well as the $5 million in additional TAP gap. And we now know that the retroactive salary increase funding, which was granted last year, has been defunded by the state, which reduces our funding by another $12 million. And the story goes on. Based on housing deposits as of this week, we now know that the number of student residences on campus this year will decline from our planned capacity of 10,000 to something less than 6,000 students. At the 6,000 student level, this creates an estimated loss of $38.9 million. We will also see reduced fees across the board, from reduced student headcount and occupancy in the residence halls. This impacts our Sutra and IFR revenues, the FSA, and so on. In recognition of the postponement of the fall sports season, we reduced the undergraduate student athletic fee, leading to an additional $2 million reduction in revenue. We will have additional COVID costs due to prevention measures, student quarantine, and other COVID-related expenditures. This is a fluid and unpredictable environment, and so we are budgeting to hedge an additional $10 million, knowing that tuition could decrease and that costs will continue to increase as we determine what is needed to operate safely this fall. These costs combined leave us with an unanticipated $109.6 million in losses this coming year. This is a very significant challenge for all of us, and it comes on top of the $43.1 million of COVID costs for the year just ended June 30th. We believe we've identified a few pragmatic, albeit painful ways to make up about 50% of this shortfall. By continuing our hiring freeze, leaving vacated positions empty, reducing the rate of out-of-pocket expenditures across our university, we estimate that we can save a total of approximately $22.3 million. DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, refinanced the debt, which finances our student housing, resulting in interest savings and deferred payments. Over 2 years, this will result in one-time savings, which will be used to cover the refund of student residence hall fees from last spring and to contribute $31.1 million to cover the lost occupancy revenue for this year. Self-sustaining operations are going to have to make budget cuts as well. Athletics, for example, is going to have to find a way to cover the $2 million we will not receive in student fees. Even with these changes, there is a significant budget deficit of approximately $54.1 million. How are we going to close this gap? We have very few tools left in our toolbox. Over the last 5 years, our central reserve funds, or what you might think of as our savings account, which we use both as a rainy day fund and our reserve to support potential new programmatic investments, has averaged $80 million, which is in line with the minimum requirements for an organization of our size. At this time, we have no other options available to us, and so we must use this fund for a one-time offset of our losses. This will significantly reduce our central reserve funds by over 50% in just 1 year. This is completely unsustainable and something we'll have to change. Before I close, and particularly in recognition of the group that we have with us today, I want to acknowledge that most of this presentation has focused on the research and the academic operations. I would be remiss if I didn't provide some information about the hospital and clinical operations. For now, I just want to give you an overview and to show that the financial problem is not just related to academics and research. Our healthcare system has seen significant impacts as well, which we all need to understand. This shows essentially the net loss of the past 6 months through June. It is comprised of COVID costs, very significant lost revenue at both the hospital and in the clinics, and all aid that has been provided to Stony Brook University Hospital and the clinics from the CARES Act, from PPP loans and other sources, resulting in a $58.8 million impact. Actually more than we saw in the academic and research operations in the past 6 months. As we look forward, the hospital and clinics are anticipating $60 to $80 million in additional lost revenue in the first quarter of this year. So there is no easy solution to this financial challenge that we must overcome. Before we turn to Q&A, President McInnis has some closing thoughts.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I know that this is sobering news, and some of it is quite complicated. And that's why I'd encourage you to visit the website that was launched last week called Achieving Financial Sustainability. While this news is sobering, it sits in the broader context of our economy and in higher education itself, in which layoffs, furloughs, and program cuts have become common. We have tried to soften the impact to individual units by paying the $9.7 million in scheduled CSI raises out of our fast depleting reserves, rather than asking departments to come up with the cuts or the offsets in order to pay for this increase in costs. I have also asked senior leadership, and they have volunteered to take a 10% pay cut, and we have withheld the 2% raise for all management confidential employees. But all of these measures are stopgap, merely short-term fixes to what is a much longer-term problem. I don't have all the answers, and I firmly believe that this is going to take all of us. To successfully address our budget over the next 2 or 3 years, we must, as a community, begin a more substantive series of conversations and discussions across our campus. It is important that we have active participation and engagement from all faculty and staff. We need to be strategic, collaborative, open, and future-focused, and we will. I also want to emphasize a point that Kathy made earlier. This is a very fluid situation. We don't know what progress will be made against the pandemic over the next 3 to 6 months. We don't know the economic damage it will cause our state and how that will impact state support for us. We don't know what support might come from the federal government. But we all need to have as much information as possible, even if that information keeps changing. I know that the budget information I received 48 days ago or something like that on my first day as president is quite different from where it stands today. And it could be quite different again in the next few weeks. We don't know what, if any, additional short-term decisions may have to be made. While none of us knows what lies ahead, what I do believe is that the best way for us to tackle these challenges is to be open and collaborative. And that is my commitment to all of you. Whether it is short-term challenges or achieving a sustainable strategy and budget over the long term, I look forward to your ideas, to listening and sharing more information with you in the coming weeks about next steps. As these presentations have gone on, we've gotten lots of great questions and lots of great suggestions on the website. Please keep those coming. And we will now do our best to answer your questions that have been coming in both before the session began and during the session. I'll turn it back over to Dean.
Thank you, President McInnis, and thank you, Kathy. Now let's go through a few of the questions collected through the questions and ideas section of the budget website. And remember, keep submitting your questions. Okay, first question. Are SBU's financial challenges primarily about COVID costs?
Dean, COVID has certainly exacerbated our financial challenges. And we're working to try and mitigate the impact of the short-term issues in a manner that limits the impact on our academic excellence and our student success. But it has also revealed fundamental long-term challenges that simply have not been addressed in a sustainable way. The long-term problem is that costs continue to rise, but there's been no reciprocal increase in state support or the tuition rate. The model is unsustainable and needs to be addressed in a thoughtful, strategic, and collaborative way.
Thank you. Next question. You outlined some stopgap measures taken to help address the budget shortfall, but it sounds like you're telling us more cuts are ahead. Is that true? And what else is going to get cut?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Dean. I think it's really important that we all keep in mind that we are in a very fluid situation. We don't know what additional aid might come from the federal government. We don't know what the economic impact fully will be for this state or how the state will be able to support us going forward. Rather than try to speculate here, I think it's really important that we step back, focus on the long term, and have conversations about our strategic budget priorities.
Thank you. So Kathy, you talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to know more about why can't we just raise tuition to increase revenue?
We all have to remember that the maximum SUNY tuition rate is set by the legislature. And then the actual tuition charged up to this maximum is set by the SUNY Board of Trustees annually. Campuses cannot set their tuition rates independently. We are, however, engaged intently in conversations to try and address this.
So are we working with SUNY or others to lobby for more funding?
Yeah, we are very actively engaged in conversations with our colleagues at SUNY and with our state partners to try to figure out and talk about what a sustainable future is for Stony Brook and higher education in the state of New York.
So this next one is near and dear to my heart. Do you expect similar cuts in capital funding for building repairs and new construction?
Like so many things, we simply don't know. We do know that funding has been frozen for many projects, that many contracts are on hold. A few have been released recently, mostly health and safety related concerns, but we don't know what the next year will bring in terms of capital funding. We also have to remember that capital funding is a different source of funding than operating funds and can't be used for ongoing campus operations.
Thank you. Next question is, what will the financial impact be to Stony Brook University if we have to close campus again due to COVID?
Good question. The simple answer is we don't know. We don't know if we will have to close, and if so, we don't know in what mode we would continue operating. So this is another place where, rather than speculating, I think it's really important that we as a campus come together, focus on the future, and focus on our budget strategic priorities.
Thanks. So earlier it sounded like we're blaming the budget situation on the state. Is that true? And what are we going to do to fix it?
No. We understand the huge financial impact that COVID is having across our state and the impacts on the state budget. What we are advocating for is recognition of and financial support for the critical role that higher education has been playing in responding to the issues that COVID has highlighted. Issues such as social inequality and the importance of research and science. We believe strongly that the future of the state lies in the classrooms and laboratories of SUNY, including at Stony Brook.
Thank you. So how can we afford to keep spending $26 million on athletics? Do you think that's too much, particularly given that we can't even play or watch sports this fall?
Yeah, very important question. And I would say with athletics, as with actually everything else we do, we need to be willing to ask ourselves that question and examine what we find. I will say that athletics plays a really important role, not only in the experience for our student athletes, but in bringing the Stony Brook community together, enhancing our school spirit and connecting us with our larger community. And about a third of what we currently spend on athletics goes directly to our student athletes in scholarships.
So I'm noting that this has been received from attendees at some of the other conversations held this week. You've said that some leaders are voluntarily cutting their salaries. Faculty at other universities have voted to take voluntary pay cuts to help offset budget cuts and retrenchment. Is that something that's possible here at Stony Brook?
Yeah, and it's such a generous question behind that, a generous spirit, thinking about the measures that we as a campus community can take in order to protect jobs and that which is so vital to Stony Brook University. Within the union negotiated contracts, there is an option for taking a voluntary reduction in work. And because we've received this question so many times, we are currently preparing information to share with the campus community about that process. So expect something from us soon.
Thanks. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, Kathy. When are you going to get more similar level of detail regarding the hospital and clinical budgets?
As we saw in the presentation, Stony Brook Medicine is facing unprecedented financial challenges of its own due to COVID. And while many of those costs are being refunded by the state, by FEMA or others, it's incurring substantial losses. The hospital and clinic situation continues to be very fluid as they experience the pandemic firsthand. Our intention is to provide a similar level of detail on the budget of the hospital and clinic, and we'll add that to the website as soon as it's finalized.
Stony Brook Medicine's budget is bigger than the university budget, as you showed. Why can't they provide additional financial support to the campus?
You know, as we just discussed, they're facing their own issues. COVID substantially impacts the revenue of the hospitals and clinics particularly.
Thanks. How can we be expected to maintain our status as a top research university if we can't attract or hire or even fill new vacancies due to attrition?
Yeah, and that is really at the core of the work we need to do. Stony Brook University is by no means alone in facing this situation. Across higher ed, there are hiring freezes and other means to try to control costs. And there is no doubt that this is probably the most disruptive time in the history of higher education. That said, protecting our status as a research university is an absolute top priority. While we have hiring freezes in place, we also have a clearly defined exception process that we've outlined to our leaders across campus. And the conversations that we will be having in our strategic budget conversations will be very much focused on this as a top priority.
Thanks. I'm just checking my phone to see if we're getting things on the website. One of the questions is about the endowment, and can we bridge our problem using the endowment?
Sure. The Stony Brook Foundation, through the distribution from the endowment and the restricted and unrestricted gifts that they hold, provides substantial support for the school's operations. That said, there's a common misconception that the endowment is a savings account into which universities can dip as needed. In fact, all but 2.5% of Stony Brook's endowment is restricted, meaning that the financial gifts have been designated by the donor for a specific purpose, whether scholarship, a building, an academic program, or some other priority. We also have to understand that endowments are designed to keep the principal intact while using the investment income for the designated purpose. There are significant policies and statutes that govern 501c3 foundations that restrict both the amount and the usage of the foundation's holdings, and we're bound to honor their wishes and our agreements with them.
Thanks. So who'll be involved or consulted during this process? It will be top-down?
What a great question, Dean. And I think it's important to state at the outset that I believe in the power of partnerships and our coming together. I want everyone on campus who wants to have input in this process to have an opportunity to do so. I would say the first part of the process is what we're engaged in now, talking with our campus community and hearing from our campus community through the website. Ideas, suggestions, questions have been pouring in, and this will help shape and form what the next steps will be, and we'll be announcing those soon. I will commit to you that faculty and staff will be involved in this process and that everyone who wants to have input will have an opportunity to do so. We're going to have to work together to ensure that the best ideas come forward and that we build a future for Stony Brook together.
Thanks. So this process you talk about, is it just about finding ways to cut the budget?
No, it is not. We cannot cut our way to excellence. We need to bring campus together to come up with great ideas of ways that we can increase revenue. We need to talk about ways that we can collaborate and leverage efficiencies. And I think that our strategic budget conversations are really going to have to consider all of these kinds of measures in concert together.
Thank you. So this question came from another call earlier this month. Stony Brook University has devoted much time and money to supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts over the past few years. What will be the role that supporting diversity will play as you consider making cuts?
Yeah, such an important question because equity, inclusion, and diversity are core to the values of Stony Brook University, and they will remain so. As a piece of that, I recently promoted Judith Brown-Clark, who was our Chief Diversity Officer, to the role of Vice President for Equity and Inclusion, ensuring that not only her voice, but really amplifying the voice of our campus are present for all leadership conversations. And despite our budgetary challenges, I have ensured that the budget in her office supporting our equity, inclusion, and diversity initiatives remains intact for this year.
Thank you. So checking my watch, we're about at the end of the hour. Thank you, Dr. McInnis. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you all for listening in today. We appreciate you being here. Remember, please continue to visit the budget website as we'll continue to update it. And keep submitting your questions. These questions are regularly added to our frequently asked questions based on things we hear from you. President McInnis, any parting words?
Yes, I just want to thank you all for taking time to listen in today, for taking time to submit your ideas, your questions, your suggestions for us. It's a vital part of the process. And together, we are going to work to define Stony Brook's future together. Thanks for being with us this morning.